Okay, I'm going to introduce Enrique. Hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Thank you. Enrique Traver is 67. He's married to Shirley Traver. He has 5 children and 5 grandchildren. He's a lawyer, economist, CEO of Copragi, a Brazilian agri-commodities trading company. Born in Spain, living in Brazil over 50 years. Based in Curitiba, Paraná, south of Brazil. Student of the Urantia Book since 2009. President of the Urantia Association Brazil from February 2016 up to February 2020, and host of the Cabarita Urantian Study Group since, and I think this might be an error, 1914. Enrique, I hand over to you.
Okay, thanks, Philip, for the kind short introduction. It was very nice. Good day to you all. Here in Curitiba, south of Brazil, we are just about 400 kilometers south of São Paulo. So just starting the morning this Saturday. So right now it is 8 a.m. in Curitiba. I thank the organizer for inviting me and you all for the chance of being together and sharing your experience and the teachings of the 5th revelation. So Jesus once said, I have come forth from the Father. If therefore you are ever in doubt as to what you would ask for the Father, ask in my name, and I will present your petition in accordance with your real needs and desires, and in accordance with my Father's will. So let's take a moment to get connected to our Father. Dear Father, we thank you for the opportunity for being together. Today we ask you to cure our physical, mental, and spiritual disease as per your will. So we will now go into a PowerPoint presentation. I hope that covers most of the things I intend to share with you all. And I hope you all are seeing my screen now. So, let's see. Okay. So our Father knows what we have need of even before we ask him. Certainly our perception about urgencies are different than they are for God. Most of the time we don't realize that. This is why I suggested a reflection today about God's time. And I hope we can maybe feel why often we seem to be disappointed about our petitions that looks like they were not answered. So our universal Father is the only personality in all universe who does actually know the number of the stars and planets of the space. So the problem we have very often is that our Father is able to see the entire frame from the past, including the present and the eternity. So as finite being, we only foresee the present. And perhaps if you are really good, we can see or foresee up to our physical life end. So most of our petitions are focused on what is going on in our lives on the current time. And so the Father is seeing our future. So that's why sometimes we have difficulties on understanding what is happening. So all genuine spirit-born petitions are certainly answered. Many times we have the perception that our petition to God is not answered, and most of this perception comes from the fact that we don't receive the answer on the time we have decided, or we simply don't perceive it as being answered on a modified or on a different format. And normally it comes on a better way, but often we don't perceive that as well. So when we look to our eternal future, if we look to our eternal future, perhaps we'll be able to perceive, understand better the answers of our petitions. So the failure in our perception drives us to the idea that for some reason our petition was not answered, and so they may be useless, or it may give us the feeling that we are not there by our one. Often we lose the faith. But all genuine spirit-born petitions are certainly of an answer. Jesus said, "Ask ye and you shall receive." But you should remember that you are progressive creatures of the time and space. So you should constantly recognize that the time-space factor in the experience of our personal reception of the few answers to our manifold prayers and petitions. So when we ask for, God opens a door where there are only walls. And if we pay attention, we will perceive that. Father Wisdom dictates what is the best answer for the child prayer. Do we really know what we need and what is the best for us? The purpose of our life is to grow through our experience, to move towards perfection. The challenges we face are part of a learning or a training process. When looking into our eternal future, we certainly will see things from a different perspective, from a different urgency. So the child is always reading his rights when he presumes to petition the parent, and the parent is always reading his parental obligation to the immature child when his superior wisdom dictates that the answer to the child prayer be delayed, modified, or segregated, transcended, or postponed to another stage of our spiritual ascension. During Jesus' life on the flesh, he often repeated, "My time is not arrived yet." Many of his followers could not understand what he was talking about. There are many examples that can suggest us the good time, the God's time, and the God's time, and why it is different from our time. For this morning, I picked up a couple examples. One of them is the well-known event of Lazarus' resurrection. And also, I chose another example, which is a personal experience, which I would like to share with you all. Concerning Lazarus, I just want to point out some few things. Lazarus and his family were close friends of Jesus. All the family were believers and followers of Jesus' teachings, so they had a high confidence in Jesus and a strong faith. Them all knew that any child of God would resurrect, as Jesus explained them this before. They also believed and loved our universal Father, and they knew that Jesus would only act according to our Father's will. Although all of that, they thought Jesus would attend their petition to cure Lazarus. So Lazarus got severely sick, and his sisters were at Bethany while Jesus by then was at Philadelphia. So on the Sunday, a few hours before Lazarus died, Mary and Martha, sisters of Lazarus, sent Jesus a message. They were confident that he would come or he would speak the words to cure Lazarus. When Jesus received the message, Lazarus was already dead for about 11 hours. Even though he said, this sickness is really not death. Lazarus had been dead since Sunday, when on the Thursday, Jesus arrived at Bethany just after noon. Martha met Jesus. She fell at his feet, claiming, Master, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. So Jesus reached down and lifting her up on her feet said, only have faith, Martha, and your brother shall rise again. I am the resurrection and the life. Who believes in me, though he dies, yet shall he live. In truth, whoever lives and believes in me shall never really die. So, did Jesus, when we see that, did Jesus knew Lazarus was already dead? Did Jesus knew Lazarus was sick before receiving the message from the sisters? Would Jesus cure him before he died? If Jesus knew he was sick and had no plan to perform the act of resurrection for the reasons we know, did he plan Jesus at Lazarus' resurrection before? So all those questions, even the revelators, they really don't know all the answers. But it's interesting to see all those questions raising up on a situation where certainly there was a petition from the sisters and the community was waiting for Jesus to do something. And even though that believed in the teachings of Jesus were expecting maybe another way for for Jesus to comply without answering that petition. So after comforting Mary and Martha, Jesus asked to see where they laid Lazarus, and they moved to the family tomb down in the garden with all the family friends present at the moment, asking themselves why the master did not come to cure his friend before he died. Jesus truly hesitated about bringing Lazarus back to the mortal life. Jesus regretted having to summon his friend back to experience the bitter persecution which he well knew Lazarus would have to endure as a result of being the subject of the greatest of all demonstrations of the divine power of the Son of Man. While Jesus thought the sisters' messages sent word that it was not to the dead, at the same time, he went in person up to Bethany and even asked to the sister, where you have laid him. Even though all of this seems to indicate that the master was proceeding after the manner of his life and in accordance with the limited knowledge of the human mind, nevertheless, the records of the universe reveal that Jesus' personalized adjuster issued orders for the indefinite detention of Lazarus' thought adjuster on the planet subsequent to Lazarus' death, and that his order was made of record just 15 minutes before Lazarus breathed his last. And so on this Saturday afternoon, about 2:30, was the stage all set in this little hamlet of Bethany for the enactment of the greatest of all works connected with the earth ministry of Michael of Nebadon, the greatest manifestation of divine power during his incarnation in the flesh, since his own resurrection occurred after he had been liberated from the bonds of mortal habitation. Then Jesus ordered, "Take away the stone," and then, "Father, I am thankful that you heard and granted me my request. I know that you always heard me, but because of those who stand here with me, I do speak with you, that they may believe that you have sent me to the world, and that they may know that you are working with me in that which we are about to do." And when he had prayed, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." In just 12 seconds of earth time, the hitherto lifeless from Lazarus began to move, and presently sat up on the edge of the stone, whereon it had rested. His body was bound about with grave cloths, and his face was covered with a napkin. And as he stood up before them alive, Jesus said, "Loose him and let him go." So Jesus performed God's action, answering a petition, but in a complete different way and in a complete different time that anyone could have expected. It was not before Lazarus died, as Lazarus' sister expected, perhaps. In that they wanted and petitioned it. And it was not on the normal time most believers would expect it to happen. So the resurrection after...
Take you back to bed, Wiggy, PJ.
But it was on God's time. What an experience for we all. So this is a short experience showing God's time on the case of the Lazarus resurrection. And if you will now allow me, I would like to share with you an experience of my family that we have passed through about 3 years ago. Many of us may understand this experience is in a different way than I and my family do. We personally believe this experience is plenty of miracles and God's action, which gave us, to our family, a very high comprehension about God's time and an outstanding training that elevated our spiritual perception. Some of you may understand that God would not interact with us in the material realities as we believe, and maybe some of you may think this entire event is just a situation, plenty of coincidence and nothing else. But that's not our perception. So in any case, I will report the event to all of you, then you will be able to reach your own conclusions. So these beauties here on the side of this slide They are Agnes, my daughter. She is the third child. We have 5 children. And the girl with her is Sophia, Agnes' daughter. This event begins in 2001 when I acquired a property, one apartment in Mariscal, which is a beach in the south of Brazil. For any reason, in 2011, Sueli, my wife, and I decided to sell this apartment. See what happened to our family.
Apartamento.
Yeah. So here I placed a line of events. On the upper side of that, I am sharing what happened to that apartment we haven't bought. And then on the lower side, I have placed Agnes events. So then we can follow and trace what happened. So in 2001, as I said, we bought this apartment on the beach. This was an apartment for enjoying weekends at the beach. Therefore, it was normally used during weekends or holidays. At the same time we bought the apartment, we hired a couple housekeepers to clean and keep this apartment organized. So these housekeepers, they were also the caretakers on the building of the apartment we bought. At the very beginning, we used to go to this apartment very often, but after some few years, we had other leisure options. And each time, less and less, we used that facility, so which at the end, it was representing a very high maintenance cost for us. So we decided to sell it in 2011. As I always do in my day-to-day life, I asked the Divine Minister to enlighten me in my decision making. So these decisions are beneficial to me, to my family, and all the people that may be affected by those decisions. And also I try to ensure that those decisions won't hurt anyone and may ensure that they are aligned with our Father's will. For some years, we insisted on selling this apartment, and although we received many people interested in buying it, we were never able to complete the sale, which was curious when several other apartments on the same building were sold in the same period, even at higher price than those we intended. In 2014, one of the brokers who were working to sell this apartment told us that the housekeepers acted against the apartment sale when they received visitors interested in buying it. So we never were present when the visitors came to visit the apartment for looking at it. Normally, those housekeepers were the ones receiving them there. So as a result, we had a conversation with the housekeepers and promised them a commission fee in case they helped us to sell the apartment. However, in 2014, Brazil began to plunge into a deep economic crisis that still is ongoing. And during this period, investors decided to preserve liquidity and not to invest in the purchase of real estate, which made the market for real estate to become completely paralyzed since then to almost nowadays. Because of that, in July 16, as a result of this crisis, we decided to stop selling the apartment. So instead, we decided to renovate it, painting and replacing the furniture with the intention of using it, even eventually renting it during vacation season to an Airbnb. So in August 16, just after the decision of the renovation of this apartment, we learned that our daughter Agnes, 34 by then, was getting divorced. Of course, it was a big surprise to us and a big concern for the family because besides all, she had a little daughter, Sophia, which by then was 4. So in September 16, things got worse and Agnes lost her job in September 2016. By then, she was living in a rented apartment in São Paulo, and we were very worried about her future. So to help and give her some protection, we decided to buy her an apartment in São Paulo. For this reason, we again started considering the possibility of selling the beach apartment to capture resources to pay for the apartment in São Paulo. So in October 16, while cash for a possible sale of the beach apartment was not available, we decided to finance the acquisition of Agnes' apartment, and we managed to do so. So we bought the apartment, and in November 2016, she was already living in the new apartment. In December 2016, we found a buyer for the beach apartment. The negotiation ended up closing the deal with this buyer. And it was even at a better price than what we expected. So 5 years after we took the first decision of selling the apartment, we managed to sell it in a moment that we even didn't expect it would happen so soon. It was interesting that our housekeepers by then sent us a beautiful thanks letter stating that the salary they earned with us allowed them to educate their son from elementary school to college, and that their son was graduating as doctor on that year. So those housekeepers, they stayed with us from 2001 to 2016, 15 years. So with this salary, they paid for the college of their son. And that was, they were fighting to make sure that we won't be able to sell the apartment before. Anyway, we were really happy for that and not for not having fired the employees when we learned they acted in a way that prevented us from selling the apartment before. In January 17, we did all the procedures for the sale of the apartment, and during early January 17, we completed the transaction and received the sales amount from the buyer in our bank account. We were already getting ready to pay for the Agnes apartment mortgage when we were so thankful to God for allowing us to manage and combine this transaction. When the buyer of the apartment came to visit us, asking for 25% discount on the price he had paid for the apartment. In Brazil, when you buy a property, buyers can claim for the cost repair if they encounter hiding problems in the property that require large expense. This buyer was a big businessman running a very large real estate company. Therefore, he had a large experience in this type of business. So he carefully prepared some reports from engineers pointing out problems in the apartment to pressure us to return part of the money he had paid to us. Of course, all those problems raised were not real, And if we had to conduct a legal dispute, it would take some few years to get resolved. And during that period, we could not use the apartment and neither the money. Plus, we would still risking losing the lawsuit. So the alternative we had was to refuse the claim and propose a cancellation of the transaction with returning the money to the buyer. But in this case, the law provides that the buyer would have to reimburse the sellers for all the costs we had in the transaction, including commission, taxes, everything. So this is what we did. The buyer said he would think about it, but the fact is that for this option, he would no longer be able to claim the discount. And if we wanted to do the deal, he wanted to do the deal, he would have to pay for the incurred costs we had for selling the apartment, including all those costs. In the meantime, we could not use the money. So with this situation in February 17, normally in Brazil, in February, we have the Carnival holidays, which during the year of 2017 took place from February 24 to March 1. We're still very worried about Agnes, so we decided to bring her and Sophia to spend the holiday with us on the beach. When she arrived from São Paulo, where they live, at our home in Curitiba, she showed us some purple spots that were appearing on her skin, apparently without a non-explainable cause. But her general condition was good, so she was feeling well, and we decided to observe and follow the trip plan. So as soon as we arrived at the beach, Sueli and I realized that things were not going very well. At times, we noticed a little mental confusion at Agnes. There were silly details, almost imperceptible, but as parents, we noticed them. Because of this, we decided to anticipate our return to Curitiba to take Agnes to the doctor and see what was happening. We arrived in Curitiba on the Monday 27 around lunchtime. We were looking for a hematology clinic, even though being a holiday, the most important one in Curitiba, luckily was working. So we went with Agnes, and after the consultation and some laboratory tests performed, the doctor diagnosed that she was in a moderate form of purple. He also asked for some complementary tests and started the medication. With all of that, I thought it would be best for her to return to São Paulo and continue her exams and treatment at the Albert Einstein Hospital in São Paulo, since this is one of the best Latin American hospitals. So after discussing that possibility with the doctor in Curitiba, he authorized her to travel to São Paulo and appointed a doctor at the Einstein Hospital to continue her treatment. So she traveled, she went to São Paulo, and the next day, the indicated doctor was not available. But there was a doctor from his team who attended Agnes and provided a series of new tests. The next day, she was hospitalized to facilitate treatment and complete further tests. And that was March 1st. That day, when she got hospitalized, I learned that Agnes' health insurance plan was interrupted because her ex-husband had changed job and their health insurance plan had been changed. So they were in an insurance plan transition period, and pending a weekday for a week. They would be, during a week, they would be short for any hospital medical coverage. So we've made the arrangements for her to be hospitalized on a private way. So in São Paulo, the doctors agreed with the diagnosis made by the doctor in Curitiba and decided that she would be under observation and doing new tests. It happened that Agnes had planned a small party to celebrate Sophia's birthday that would happen or take place on March 5th. So the doctors decided to release Agnes, allowing her to carry Sophia party by then. And the treatment and follow-up would not, in principle, require her to be hospitalized. So during Sophia's birthday party, Agnes had a severe back pain, and I was very scared, thinking that she could be having a heart attack. I placed her on the car and I drove to the hospital. And during the ride, she got worse and worse, and I was terrified. While driving to the hospital, I phoned to Dr. Nelson Hammerslack, the doctor responsible for Agnes' treatment. And also, I called my cardiologist, Dr. Flavio Terrassotti. Luckily, both doctors were in the town and they moved to the hospital. I arrived at the hospital very quickly and then literally invaded the emergency room without following any protocol. The doctors started texting for a possible heart attack, which was not confirmed. The suspicion then fell on a possible stroke. They had a CT scan, and there was nothing as well. So performing other exams, they soon found out that she was having a serious liver hemorrhage. By then, my cardiologist, Dr. Flavio, was there, as well as Dr. Nelson, Agnes' doctor. So all of those procedures took no longer than 30 minutes. But by then, Agnes was already going into a coma. While all of that was going on, the hospital admission control approached me to see what health insurance plan we could get Agnes into the hospital for. Of course, as I said before, her health plan was temporarily suspended, so she had no plan. Momentarily, I was desperate. But soon I remembered the money from the beach apartment deposited in my account, and I immediately authorized her to enter as a private person, indicated that I would pay for the hospital expenses. Thanks God, I had this money and I would use it if necessary. Otherwise, we would not be able to continue with Agnes on that hospital. I thank God for having this reserve. By the way, even today when I remembered all this history, I can get enough of thanking our Father for preventing me for 5 years from selling this apartment, and that on his time, in the time he understood that I would in fact need the money, he had provided the grace so that we could have those resources. It is not just a question of research, but working the miracle of making sure to give we all a fantastic opportunity for spiritual growth, strengthening our faith, gratitude, and adoration for all the miracles that involve this situation. Agnes was losing too much blood, so doctors initiated an impressive transfusion of blood with large quantities and method. Literally, her doctor, Dr. Nelson, was holding the blood bags and squeezing them so that the blood would not stop flowing quickly into Agnes' body. I was very impressed when I saw that. Then Dr. Nelson thought they should have an operation to stop the liver bleeding. So he came to me and asked for permission to call Dr. Antonio Luis Macedo, who is one of the most renowned abdomen surgeons in Brazil. After trying to find Dr. Macedo pending for about 5 minutes, they failed and asked me for permission to call another surgeon. I asked them to insist a few moments more with Dr. Macedo, and luckily in 2 minutes more, they found him. After explaining him what was happening, he pointed out that there was no way she could be operated, as she would not resist and survive to the surgery, and recommended to call for one of his team group, a group specialized on revascularization. And so the idea was to perform a revascularization of her liver and contain the bleeding via a catheterization process. Everything was quickly organized, and the leader of that team, Dr. Felipe, started the procedures. After about 4 hours, they finished the procedure, saying having been successful in containing the hemorrhage, and that from now on, it would be necessary to wait for Agnes to recover to assess for the possible sequel. Agnes had received about 7 liters of blood. She had gone into shock, and was possible that she was lacking oxygen on her brain and other organs. So no one could predict what kind of sequels this incident could have left. We had to wait to evaluate. She was placed on the ICU, and we all prayed to our beloved Father, hoping he would grant us the miracle of having Agnes healed and back with us. That night, I stayed there in the ICU with her. All other family members left since they could not spend the night there. I stood there in the dark room, looking at her unconscious and dejected body, which I have an image here, plugged into so many devices that I couldn't even count. All what I was hearing was just the noise made by all those devices. Oops. Sorry. While worried and frightened by the situation, I could not stop thinking about how God has conducted those events, starting from the sale of the beach apartment and the Agnes collapse in a way that she could be received at the Einstein Hospital. And also, I could not stop thinking about the whole sequence of events, making sure I got to the hospital in time, that she was rescued, and how we were lucky to talk to Dr. Macedo, which even though without seeing her, he prevented us against having her operated and recommending the right team to stop the liver bleeding. One may never know, but the truth is that I'm convinced all along that divine providence was at work with all of us, me, my family, Agnes, the doctors, and everything, so that the things would fit together and finally would be now looking for Agnes' recovery. Now, there was little by then that we could do. We only could thank the Father and all the heavenly beings for having reached that point, and once again praying and just being in the hands of God, trusting Him, and with faith looking for whatever the outcome would be. I would be ready to accept His sovereign will in this certainty that that will would always be the best for us. On the other hand, I knew that Agnes would struggle to recover. There was nothing else we could do. I cried for the rest of that morning, like any father cries when he sees a son suffering. And once again, that filled me with the confidence and faith, because I knew that my Heavenly Father would not be indifferent to the suffering of Agnes and all the family members. Of course, He's never indifferent, no matter what the final outcome is. He sees us all in eternity and knows that what we need to be there. So He also knows that our suffering is temporary and necessary many times to save us. The doctors now had made a diagnosis that her illness would be such as HELLP syndrome. Other complications occurred. She had to do a revascularization of the liver once again because there was still a new bleeding point. On the third day of the ICU, the hospital treasurer called me. They told me, being concerned about the value of Agnes' account that was skyrocketing, and wanted me to be updated. I must say that Agnes' husband has been with us, ex-husband has been with us the whole time, and that one of the things he was trying to solve was precisely the issue of the health insurance. He is a lawyer, and he initiated a judicial measure to compel the insurance to bear the cost once the grace period has passed, and there was no reason for the transition period to be maintained. There, at the treasurer, I asked the employee how much the accumulated amount was that we wanted to owe it to the hospital. I was startled when he gave me a value that was equivalent to 3/4 of the amount of the sale of our apartment on the beach. Even though that, I assured the employee that there would be no problem, and I asked him to give me one more day to pay for and make a guarantee deposit, because I had the expectation that the health insurance would end up taking over the expenses. So the employee agreed and said he would wait for one more day. Coincidentally, in those days, the legal period in which the beach apartment buyer could wash out the transaction of the operation, the transaction we did with him, ended. So then I could use the money as needed or desired. The next day, the fourth day of the ICU, Agnes woke up from her coma. Fortunately, she had no evidence of any serious sequelae, although she was undergoing hemodialysis because her kidneys had become paralyzed. There was also a problem with her heart, but doctors said that both problems would be gradually reversed. In fact, she looked fine, but once again, I noticed a delicate, almost imperceptible mental confusion in her. I told the doctor that something was wrong, and he assured me that this type of situation was common in people who had just recovered from the coma, which I knew, but that was not exactly what I was talking about. And I felt that something was wrong, and insisted again with the doctors to no avail. And sadly, the next day, again, she fell into coma. Many theories were raised, and I had to find with the doctors to oppose to some procedures. They wanted to adopt, including Dr. Macedo, who now wanted to operate her to correct the damage that had been produced on her liver with the hemorrhage. Because good part of the blood from the hemorrhage had become encapsulated into the peritoneum, a membrane that lines the liver. Usually this type of problem resolves itself by a reaction of our body. But Dr. Macedo thought that in her case, this hematoma could be becoming infected, and I insisted with them that the diagnosis of HELLP syndrome could be wrong, and that we probably had not yet discovered the problem. Finally, after discussions, one of the doctors working on the team of Dr. Nels, who for many years was a laboratory test analyst, listened to me and decided to retake and perform all the laboratory tests himself. Meanwhile, the hospital treasurer called me again. Luckily, at the same time, my ex-son-in-law arrived with the news that the judge accepted our claim, and he ordered the health insurance company to assume all the hospital space. I breathed a sigh of relief, not because I was saving and spending that money, but because I knew I had not enough money to maintain Agnes there. So after 6 hours conference, the doctors called me and they reached a consensus and a laboratory test now confirming that the disease was really not HELLP syndrome, and that unfortunately it was something much worse. The disease was a thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, which they call TTP, a very serious and a very rare autoimmune disease. Less than one case for every 100,000 people may get into that kind of disease. Until then, this disease was fatal until recently, this disease was fatal for about 95% of the people who were affected by it. Today, there is a treatment that ensures success for over 80% of the treated cases, which basically consists of doing a plasmapheresis with the exchange of the patient plasma by plasma obtained from healthy donors, which is basically a procedure done through a machine, a process similar to hemodialysis, which consists on separating the plasma from patient blood and may or not may include the exchange of that plasma. So to perform this cure, what is needed is a proper diagnosis, and doctors are not always able to reach it, and need the machine available to make the plasmapheresis, and then have enough donors to obtain the plasma and exchange it. So after the diagnosis, the treatment of Agnes was started. In total, we needed 1,250 donors of plasma to cover, to help her recovering from her disease. This was another miracle. So after a period of 30 days, Agnes recovered and she finally left the ICU. So finally, at the end of May, when we were starting already June, she left the hospital. And after being monitored for about 2.5 years, she was discharged. She is well, thanks to the miracle performed by our Heavenly Father. So now that everything has passed, so in June 17, we were able to use the money to settle the Agnes apartment mortgage. So that is the little history about what happened to Agnes and how things moved towards our little history here, which enhanced our spiritual growth and also made strengthen our faith in whatever has happened. So I thank you all for listening to this little history. Thanks.
Thank you, Enrique. Is there any questions? I think now we can take a break. Be back in about 5 minutes' time.
I just
sorry.
I just wanted to say that I've got a favorite quote for many years now. It is on God's schedule. And God's schedule is not my schedule. And so when something happens and it doesn't correspond to what I was expecting to happen, well, I just let go and take a distance and say, okay, let's see what you are offering to me, because it's a way that God invites himself in my life. And so I know that things are really going to happen. What is needed for me is always going to happen, but I have to just step away and cultivate patience, because God is going to answer on his schedule, and his time is not my time. So thank you, Enrique, for what you shared with us, because I can really see how well he organizes everything on his time. And one of the problems of Eve, it was her being impatient. And I think that one of our problems is to be impatient as well, and working on that and saying, okay, it's not time for that yet. Let's see when and where things are going to happen as God has decided. So thank you very much for what you shared.
Thank you, Agnes. Yes, that's right. We have to learn that his schedule is not always like ours. And often it's much better than we think. No.
Yeah. He's wiser.
Yes.
Much wiser.
Okay, so let's take a break, stretch our legs, grab a quick cuppa, and we will be back in about 3 minutes' time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique.